In this video, we'll build a Bootstrap landing page with a dark mode CSS style switch. Okay guys, so I'm excited to share this Bootstrap landing page with you where we'll have a switch going from dark mode to light mode as you see here, and I'll also show you how to change it so you can go from light mode to dark mode. So I have some files prepared for us already for the tutorial, which I'll get to in just a moment, but first let's take a look at the responsiveness. So we're going to have one breakpoint so the landing page can resize for mobile and tablet devices. And just to show you how it appears on mobile, here we are on my iPhone, and as you can see, we have the animation, and then when I hit the switch, we'll go to light mode, and we'll also add the switch to the very bottom of the page so we can see the effect with inverting the background color and the text. So in the description of this video will be a download link with the files to get us started with the tutorial. And the first file that you see called darkmode.html is something we'll look at first, and then we'll get to the actual landing page project that you're seeing in the background. And also included is the Bootstrap templates.html file, which is a link to my website, w3newbie.com, if you'd like to check out my Bootstrap templates and support my YouTube channel. So as you can see in the background, I have my text editor open, which is Visual Studio Code. And if you'd like to learn more about Visual Studio Code, the extensions and shortcuts that I'll use in the video, you can check out the resources page at w3newbie.com, where I have an introductory lesson on the text editor. Okay, so moving back over to the starter files that I prepared for the video, the first thing that we'll take a look at is the darkmode.html file that you see here. So you'll notice I have darkmode.html open on the left with the yellow text in the dark background. So if we change this to red and saved it, we'll get the red text. Or if we remove the color altogether, we'll end up with white text and the black background, as you can see. So with the combination of these two meta tags where it says color scheme and supported color schemes, in addition to the matching CSS style declaration to the root or HTML document itself, this tells the web browser to display our website in dark mode and invert the colors if the user has dark mode enabled. Then from there, we can apply dark mode specific CSS with the prefers color scheme dark media query. So if I were to pull up the general settings of my Mac computer and change it to light mode from dark, you'll see that we'll lose the margin that's set around the heading 1, and it'll revert back to the white background with the dark text. So using this method to achieve dark mode is great if we know that our user already prefers dark mode, but in order to give them the option to switch back to light mode, we would have to change out both the CSS and the two meta tags that are included for dark mode. So what I've decided to do instead is to make it so we're only switching out the CSS to achieve our dark mode landing page that we're going to build now. Okay, so the remaining files that I have open are from the Bootstrap dark mode folder from the starter files in the description of this video. So before we go over what's included for us in index.html, I'll mention that I've already included a lot of the code for us because I plan to make a complete dark mode website design tutorial in the near future. So aside from the main HTML5 meta tags in the head section, we'll include a link to the bootstrap min.css file in the CSS folder. Then we have style.css, which has an ID attached to it, and we'll cover that in just a little bit. Then we have animate.css for the animation of the landing page content. Then lastly, in the head section, we have the Lato font style from Google Fonts. And moving down towards the bottom of index.html, I've included the script for us already, which will switch back and forth our CSS sheets. So when we toggle the dark mode switch, we'll get the link element from the head section using the ID style1, which is what we saw attached to the CSS style sheet here in the head section. And then what it's going to do is switch the CSS sheet to style2.css, then back to style.css, and it will loop our style sheets, including .css at the end of what was included in the previous line. Also included is the latest version of jQuery to make it so you can run bootstrap min.js if you'd like to build around this with more Bootstrap features. And lastly, at the bottom of index.html, I've included inside of a script the resource for the switch, and separately the resource for the JavaScript, which switches the style sheets back and forth. So what I'll do now is hit the Go Live feature with Visual Studio Code in the lower right-hand corner. And as you'll see, we'll have a dark background set already because in the style sheet, I've included that dark background color for us. And at the bottom of the file, I've included CSS for the fixed background image of the landing page, as well as CSS for the dark mode switch, which we'll reference the classes for in our HTML and add some custom CSS for the colors and the layout of the landing page and the dark mode switch. Okay, so let's start by going over to index.html, and then what we'll do is lay out the HTML for the three classes making up the fixed background image, which we just saw some of the style for in style.css. So the three classes will be inside of one another, starting with the landing class, followed by home wrap, and inside of home wrap, we'll have home-inner. So with our HTML laid out, we can add the background image and the height we want it to display at. So let's start with the landing class by adding period, then landing, and we'll give it its height first. So we'll give it a height of 100 vertical height, or 100% of the screen vertically. And though our background color is already set, I'm going to add a background color to this as well, so it's included for us in case we want to change the background color in the light mode version of the style sheet. So now we can set the background image, and we're going to apply that to the home inner class, which is the innermost class out of the three. So let's add period and then home-inner, followed by background image. And the background image URL, we'll first need to back out of the CSS folder with period, then /img for that image folder, and then mountain.jpg. So once we save it, we'll see that the background image is now displaying, and it's a little bit lighter than I want for a dark mode landing page. So I'm going to add some opacity with opacity 0.55 to see some of the background color that's set with the really dark purple/black shade. Then with the image set, in order so we can see the fixed positioning that we're going to add to it, let's add some content underneath the landing page caption area with the comment that's there. So let's add the Bootstrap container class, and I'm going to add some vertical padding of 3 rem with py-5. Then inside of that, we'll have our Bootstrap row, and I'm also going to make the text center inside of the row. And to take up the most space, I'm going to add a heading 1 and then just add lorem text or ipsum text. And then I'll copy the heading 1 tag with the text inside of it and paste it in twice. So once we save it, we'll see that we have our text displaying underneath the landing page image, but the image itself isn't displaying in a fixed position. So let's go back to style.css and add position fixed for the home inner class. And then if we scroll up, we'll see that the background image will stay fixed on the page. So now what we can do is start laying out our landing page content, which I've added the comments for. And this will include the Bootstrap text, the dark mode text, as well as the switch underneath them. So let's start off inside of the comment with a non-Bootstrap class called Caption, and then we'll make our text center as well as make the text uppercase. Then inside of this, we can add our headings, but our headings are going to include classes for animate.css, which we included a style sheet for in the head section of the website. So if you're not familiar with animate.css, you can go to animate.style, and this is going to show you the documentation for animate.css. So if we scroll down, we'll be able to find a basic example to add the animate.css classes to our heading element. So as you can see, it'll start with animate _animated, then animate _ and the animation that you want to display. So what I'm going to do is simply copy the animate, animated, then animate, and I'm going to add my own animation preference instead of the bounce animation for all of the elements in the landing page. So I'll go back to index.html and paste that in, then make sure that the second bit is included as a class with no space in between the first class. And the animation that I'll include is called fade in up, and make sure that you include the camel characters for in and up with the class. Then in addition to adding the animation to the element, animate.css also gives us the option to add a delay or to alter the speed of the animation, which is what we're going to do. So if we take another quick look at the landing page, you'll notice that the elements come in at the same time, but the lower elements take longer to fade in. So the heading 1 will make the fastest with the class animate _fast. And for the text, I'll add Bootstrap. But once we save it, we aren't going to be able to see the text just yet because we need to position it on top of the landing page image with our CSS referencing the class Caption. So let's go back to style.css and locate the landing page caption comment, then add the class, and we're going to give it a width of 100% of the landing page with width 100%. And then I'm also going to add max width 100% so the landing page content doesn't span outside of the width of the landing page on small screens. And we'll also add position absolute so we can place the element where we want on the page. So right now it's sitting beneath the actual landing page or the landing class, which has the other classes inside of it. So to position it in the middle of the landing page, we'll need to add a percentage to the top. So we'll add top and then 25%. And you can change this if you want depending on the landing page content that you add. Also, you'll notice that the text is already white because if you remember, the color white was already included for the body tag. Then for good measure, the last thing that I'll add here is some positive Z index to make sure that the Bootstrap text or the landing page content in general displays on top of the background image. So now we're ready to drop down to the dark mode text, and we're going to display this in a heading 3, but we can copy this heading 1 and paste it underneath. Then simply change the heading 1 to the heading 3 tag, and I'll change the text to say dark mode instead of Bootstrap. Then as you know, we're also going to change the animation speed, so I'll change this from fast to slow. So now if we save it and refresh, we'll start to see the animation take its form, and we're ready to drop down to add the dark mode switch. So for the switch, we're going to use animation as well, and we can copy the heading 3 tag right here with the animation included and paste that in. Then what we'll do is we'll change heading 3 to label. And the reason that we use the label tag is because inside of it, we're going to have a checkbox, and the label tag allows us to increase the click area of the checkbox. Then for the animation, I'm going to change it from slow to slower, and we'll also include a class that's already referenced towards the bottom of style.css, which is the switch class. So let's add our switch class to the HTML. Then inside of the label, we'll add an input tag with the type set to checkbox. So the next thing that we'll do is we'll need to add an element to include the classes for styling the switch, which will be the slider and round classes. And this will also include the toggle switch on click. So we'll add the span tag, then the slider class in addition to the round class. Then once we hit enter, we can add the toggle function. So if you remember from the script, it's going to start with that function toggle. So we'll want to add that on click. So we'll add the on click attribute, and then we'll give it the value of toggle, then add parentheses, and this will trigger our script function. So right now, if we save our landing page and hover over where the input switch should be, we'll be able to see a little clickable area for the click function, and that will switch to our blank style sheet for now, but we're not going to be able to click it back because there's no styling around that span tag containing the on click event, which is required to get us back to the first style sheet in addition to the checkbox. So now that we know the functionality is there, once we add the CSS for the checkbox to the second style sheet, let's go about styling our elements on top of the landing page image, starting with the headings. So let's go back to style.css and add our CSS styling underneath the caption class. So I'll add the caption class and then the heading 1, or you can just add the heading 1 itself. And then let's increase the font size to 6.5 rem. So that's 6.5 times 16 pixels, which is the inherent font size with Google Chrome. Then I'll also space the letters out a little bit with letter spacing 0.3 rem in between each character. Then we can add some text shadow to make the white color of the font stand out with text shadow, and we'll add 0.2 rem horizontal, 0.2 rem vertical, and then a blur radius of 1 rem, and I'll make the color black. So now once we save it, we'll see the text shadow, and that really makes all the difference with the background image being dark with our white text. Then additionally, I'll add some padding on the bottom to separate it from the heading 3 with padding bottom 1.2 rem. So now once I save it, our heading 1 will be set and we're ready to drop down to the heading 3. And I think that my browser is just set at a zoom right now, but I'll correct that in a moment. Then for the heading 3 styling, we can simply copy all of the CSS for the heading 1 and paste it in because we'll use the same style declarations, we'll just change the values. So let's first adjust the font size to 4 rem from 6.5. Then the letter spacing will actually increase a bit to 1 rem, so it's a little bit wider. And the text shadow will leave the same, but then for the padding bottom, I'll add 2.5 rem to separate it from the dark mode switch a little bit more. Okay, so with that, we're ready to start adding the styling to the dark mode switch. So the first thing that we'll reference will be the slider class, which we'll use to give the gray background color to the switch. So I'll add the slider class, and then for the background color, we'll give it a hex value of 6E, 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 which is sort of a mid-range gray shade, as you can see there displaying on the left. Then similar to the text, let's give it some box shadow to make it stand out. So I'll add 0.1 rem horizontal and 0.1 rem vertical, then a 0.8 rem blur radius, and I'll make the color black as well, similar to the text. So that's going to make it pop a little bit. Then next we'll add the color of the toggle switch and the transition time. So we'll use the slider class in addition to a pseudo class, which will be before, which already has the sizing set up and the positioning for the white circle on top of the toggle switch. So I'll add the before pseudo class and then the background color white. Then next we can add the transition time that it takes the white switch to switch from the left to the right. So if we click it right now, we're not going to see it switch. We'll look at it in just a moment once we add our second style sheet. So for now, we'll add transition 0.5 seconds. And then in order to make it transition both ways, we'll also apply that to the slider class without the before pseudo class. And so for now, we can just look at it on the finished version. Before we add our second style sheet, you can see the transition time right there with the switch. Now for the blue background color, once the switch is toggled, we'll need to reference the input tag and the pseudo class checked, so it's after checking the input checkbox. Then additionally, we'll need to reference the slider class so we can change the background color for that. And the background color will change from the gray shade to a dark blue shade, which the hex value for is 1849AB. So once we save it, the last thing that we'll do to match the finished version is to simply add a second checkbox at the bottom of the landing page underneath the text in the dark background area. So we can simply copy the HTML starting with the label tag and paste that in underneath the heading 1 tags. And now if we slide down, we'll have our switch at the bottom as well. So before we go about adding our CSS styling to our second style sheet, which we'll switch over to, let's add some CSS to the media query that's started for us already at the 768 pixel breakpoint. So our landing page content with the heading 1 and heading 3 text will resize for smaller screens. To do this, we can simply copy the CSS for the heading 1 and heading 3, then change some of the values. So I'll paste that into the media query and change the font size to 3.7 rem from 6.5, and the letter spacing I'll reduce in half to 0.15. Then for padding bottom, we'll make it half a rem, or 8 pixels, and the text shadow will leave the same for both the heading 1 and heading 3, and for the font size of the heading 3, I'll make it 2.7 rem, the letter spacing 0.2 rem, and the padding bottom 1.2 rem. So now if we save it, we'll see that the content will fit nicely on smaller screens as you saw with my iPhone at the beginning of the tutorial. Okay, so now we're ready to add our styling to the second style sheet, which will switch from dark mode to light mode. So what I'll do is copy all of the CSS that we have completed in style.css and paste it into our second style sheet. Then what we can do is invert our colors and change them to whatever we want from the dark mode to the light mode version of the landing page. So what I'll do is apply the dark purple color to the text color and then make the background color white. Then what we can do is test out the switch to the light mode, and we'll see that the text is dark in color and the background color turns to white, as you can see. So now we can customize the landing page area itself, starting with the image. So I have a second image in the files called mountain-light, and that's going to give us a lighter version of the same background image. Then we can also increase the opacity to see less of the background color and more of the image. So now if we test it out and use the dark mode switch, it's going to give us the light background image, but the dark landing page text doesn't look so good now with the black text shadow. So let's simply change the text shadow for the heading 1 and heading 3 from black to white. So now if we go back and hit the switch, we'll see that the black text is going to stand out a little bit more with the white text shadow, and I think that looks a little bit better. Then one additional thing that you can do is change the background color to the landing page to white if you want. You can brighten up the image a little bit more even, and you can change the opacity of the background image as well to change the color of the image. Okay, so with that, that concludes the complete tutorial for the Bootstrap dark mode landing page with the dark mode to light mode switch. Be sure to like this video, leave a comment, and subscribe because I'll be featuring the dark mode switch in another upcoming tutorial of a complete website design. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.